from self-discovery to unapologetic passion, from inner strength to outward influence. It's Your Turn charts the journey of empowerment. Welcome to our series, where the book comes to life. In each episode, we explore a chapter's wisdom through real stories. We uncover the strategies that turn potential into power. And we witness how one woman's journey can inspire countless others. Prepare to see yourself in these pages and voices. Because with every story, we're reminded, it's your turn to write the next chapter.
Welcome back. My guest today is Marcia Narine Weldon. She's the founder and CEO of Illuminating Wisdom, where she empowers individuals and organizations to transform using evidence-based, neuroscience-informed strategies. With over 3 decades of experience in law and executive leadership, Marcia has navigated high-pressure roles as a Fortune 500 executive and continues to serve as general counsel for a startup. Her journey is marked by resilience, authenticity, and a deep commitment to helping others lead with purpose. Marcia believes that facing fears head-on and embracing authenticity are critical to unlocking true potential and creating lasting impact. As a 2 times best-selling author, award-winning professor, and certified coach in numerous modalities, she combines her extensive knowledge with personal insights to inspire women to harness their inner strength and lead with integrity. Her work has been featured in top-tier publications like the New York Times, the Wall Street Journal, and Forbes. Marcia is dedicated to sharing her experiences to help other women step into their power, face their fears, and make a meaningful impact in their personal and professional lives. And that's why she is here. Marcia, I'm thrilled to have you here for the book interview on It's Your Turn. How are you doing?
I'm doing fantastic. Thanks so much for considering me for the book. I know it's going to be a very powerful tool for women to read. Not just women, but for people in general.
People in general. I do hope that some men also read it so they understand what it is about for women to thrive and to find their voice and to have an impact. And you are like the living example of this. And so I can't wait to just jump into the questions. And you made a selection of some chapters that you want to document with your views and experience and expertise. And the first part that you selected is asserting your empowered self, chapter 2, your inner compass. And in this compass, we explore the journey of self-discovery and the importance of understanding one's authentic self. And so I'm so curious to learn a little bit more about your journey of self-discovery, because we all have this moment of awakening. So how was that for you?
I think it all ties together when I talk about resilience and fear and authenticity. Without spending too much time talking about my 56-year journey, I will start off by saying, as a child, I grew up very much concerned what other people thought. My father was a Vietnam veteran with PTSD, so I had to walk around in eggshells. I had to be very careful what I said, what I did, because with his issues, you could say the wrong thing and it could cause issues. I wanted to make sure I was the smart girl, the one that always got the good grades. All of those different things, I was afraid to speak up as a child. Interestingly, my mother entered me into a beauty pageant when I was little, and that gave me, I won second runner-up, and so I got acting lessons, modeling lessons, and a few other things. And with the acting lessons, I actually ended up being other people. I was still never my true self, but I was no longer afraid to project my voice. I learned how to project, I learned how to memorize, but I also learned how to be different people regardless of the circumstance. So I was never truly myself until probably a few years ago, because I grew up, I chose to become a lawyer where there's a very specific persona. You've got all the answers, you're right, you don't buckle under stress. And so for years and years, I was always someone else. And when I finally decided to become myself was probably a few years ago when I got divorced. I got divorced during COVID. It was my second marriage. I thought this was going to last forever. As many people may remember, during the pandemic, you pretty much couldn't leave your house. So for basically 2.5 years, I worked on myself like it was a full-time job. And I got to know, what is it that I want? During that marriage, I loved him very deeply, and we're actually still good friends to this day now. But I was trying to be something for somebody else, the right kind of mother, the right kind of wife, the right kind of lawyer, the right kind of employee, the right kind of daughter, the right kind of friend. And getting divorced made me figure out what are my actual dreams and desires. So I actually say getting divorced twice. That divorce was the very best thing that could have ever happened to me, because being divorced and spending 2 years alone in the house really helps you figure out what you want. And through that, I realized I can get through pretty much anything. The things that I was afraid to do because I was worried what other people would think were the things that were really important to me. And I started to actually specifically do things that were frightening to me. Before, I avoided things that scared me. I was terrified of heights. So I said, I'm going to skydive. I'm going to do a helicopter ride. I was afraid of bats. When I did an ayahuasca ceremony, I slept in the cave with the bats because I wanted to have to know that I could actually overcome anything. And so now one of the things I tell people is to figure out what you're afraid of and do it. For some people, that's telling somebody they love them, right? For some people, that's putting on a bathing suit and going to the beach. For me, I had to go all out because I had spent so many years as what everybody thought I should be, that the only way I could know who I really could be was to do something huge. And so I did all these huge things that scared me. And I realized I'm fearless. I'm not fearful. I actually have a really strong voice and I'm going to use it. And so that's how my journey evolved. And that's how I try to help other people realize it. But again, they don't have to jump out of a plane or do a hot air balloon or sleep with bats and do mind-altering psychedelic in the Amazon. They don't have to do that. But what are they afraid of? And then once you do that, you're able to realize I can do more. You don't discover who you are really until, at least my view, until something forces you to do that. Because most people are very comfortable being complacent, even if that's complacent in their misery. Because if you're miserable and you're unhappy and you're comfortable in that area, it takes a lot to get you out of that. So the only thing that gets you out of that is something that pushes you. That might be the divorce, that might be fear, that might be something else.
It's absolutely coming out of your comfort zone, being open also to your shadow sides, and really discovering your innate strengths and your gifts. And so thank you for sharing this transformative process. I can only imagine what it must have been, and it's extremely courageous. So how do you build the confidence and the courage to do this? Because I'm pretty sure that, especially since you've always tried to be pleasing other people, probably other people also had like critique or feedback, like, Marcia, what are you doing? Why are you doing this? Are you crazy? Things like that. So where did you feel, or where did you build that confidence to do it anyway?
Because at some point you realize that no one else lives your life, right? And I will say this to be candid, because there are going to be some of your readers who have gone through the same thing. There have been times in my life when I have thought that I did not want to be alive anymore. And people would look at me from the outside and say, you've got everything going for you. How could that be the case? But I had also been a person, Harvard educated lawyer, went to Columbia University for undergrad, graduated from college in 3 years with honors. But I also, the father of my child was an abusive, violent alcoholic who tried to kill me on multiple occasions. And that led me to believe maybe I'm not as good, as smart as I am. So I had to get out of all of that. So once I realized I escaped the person who tried to kill me, I forgave him before he died, by the way, because forgiveness is a huge part of it. Once you realize that you can do those things, there are people every day that live on the street or have several children that they can barely afford and work 4 jobs. And I sat there thinking, I still have it better than that. And when you start to realize what you do have as opposed to what you don't have, it does a big reframe for you. And I started focusing on, okay, I have a great education. I do have family and friends who love me. I know that God, universe, source, spirit, whatever you want to call it, put me on the earth for a purpose. And it is my obligation to figure out what that purpose is. So knowing that my biggest obstacle was fear, I had to figure out that's what I've got to do. Some people's biggest obstacle is self-esteem or feeling not worthy. I never felt unworthy. I felt fearful, right? So what is it that makes you feel unworthy? What is it that, and how do you know that it's true? How do you know that what people have said about you is true? Because a lot of times we sit there focusing on what other people tell us. So I was not worried somebody's going to say you're crazy, etc. Because what I would say is, I'm the only person that lived with this crazy person. I'm the only person that did X, Y, Z, and I am the only person that has to live with the consequences. So until someone says, I will live in your shoes, I wasn't really worried that they would say that I'm crazy. Because there comes a point, and this only comes, I think, when you spend a lot of time by yourself in silence without listening to other voices. Really important. Yes, you should have therapy and do that and look at the experts. But at some point, you sit there still and let that voice come to you and say, this is what you're supposed to do. And once I got that confidence to trust my own voice, regardless, because I said, I'm the only one who has to live with it, I no longer cared what other people thought. Now, I might ask somebody's opinion, but I'm still going to go, because I think a lot of people can't get out of their own way because they're too busy thinking what other people are going to think, what other people will say, or they don't trust their own voice. And that third one is the biggest part. And you can't trust your own voice if you're too busy listening to everyone else's voice.
What would be your best advice for readers and people watching or listening to this interview in order to discover and access your own voice for people who really want to go into this authenticity journey?
I think the first thing is actually pretty simple. I would encourage people to first make a list of 20 things they must have in their life to be happy or content. And happiness is a fleeting feeling. I think contentment, when you're at peace with yourself, I'm good the way I am. 20 things that you must have, even if you don't have them right now. 20 things that are nice to have, and 20 things that you can't have. And then go and cut that list in half. And think about how many things in your life are you living with that you can't have, that you're actually living with on a daily basis? What are your nice to haves? And what are your must haves? And what do you need to do to get there? That might mean that you, and this is what you must have, not what society says you might have, not what your mother or your family or your sister or your best friend or even your therapist says that you must have. It's what do you know deep down? And you're going to know, because it's going to be the kind of thing that brings you joy just thinking about it. When you sit there and say, wow, this is what my life could be. And by the way, what I think that would bring me joy is very different than what somebody else would think. Many people might say, if I had $100 million, I'd be so happy. If I had $100 million, I'd probably give 90 million of it away immediately and then
Absolutely agree.
build a center, right? Whereas other people, so what I say that because some people would say, okay, first I'd buy my mother a house, and then I would pay off all my debt, and then I would do this. The first thing I'm saying is, who can I give this money to? Because that's my dream. That's how I know that's who I am. So think about, what are those must-haves, nice-haves, can't-haves? What would you do if you had $100 million? What would you do if money was no object, time didn't matter, and you didn't care what anybody else thought? That's how you're going to know. What are you so afraid to write down because you think you're going to jinx it? But deep down inside, because whoever your creator is, put a dream inside of you. And it's been muffled by so many outside influences. So sitting still, right? Whether it's a mindfulness practice, a meditation practice, something like that. And I know some people are saying, my mind is going to race all over the place. That's okay. Let it race, see where it's going, but bring it back to, what do I really want? And sit there and listen. If you pray, I think pray is talking to God, and meditation is listening to what God has to say to you, right? Listen to what it is that you're hearing and don't second guess it. The first thing that comes to your mind, start writing it down. And the more you write, whether you journal in the morning or in the evening, just free write. Don't care about what it says. Don't censor yourself, because when you're censoring yourself, what you're doing is you're listening to all those voices that are either in your subconscious from other people or all the things you think you're supposed to do. But if you just wrote, my perfect day would look like this. What does it smell like? What does it taste like? What does it feel like? Who's around you? That's what you know. And then you sit there and say, okay, how am I going to get there? And that might take 10 years, it might take 5 years, etc. But if you don't have the must-haves, nice-to-haves, can't-haves, if you don't have that North Star, that guiding principle, you will never get to where you need to go, because you're going to be too busy, again, focusing on all the external influences. What terrifies you so much? And then why does it terrify you? I don't fear dying, right, at all. That's very liberating for me. Okay, Some people fear dying. Most people fear dying. I don't fear speaking in public. That makes my life much, much easier. That's how I can sit here and talk with you, and that's how I can be a professor and do other kinds of things. But think about what scares you, and then why does it scare you? Is it because you've been told when you were younger, good girls don't argue, so then you don't speak up in meetings, you don't ask for what you want in your relationships? All of these things. So when you figure out what you're afraid of and think about the why, a question I often ask people is, who did you have to be or what did you have to do to get approval from the people who raised you when you were 7 or 8 years old? That is going to tell you exactly why you are today. And once you know the why, once you know why you are, then you can sit there and say, all right, this part I love, this part I don't love, this part I'm going to change. And then you have a clear roadmap to get to where you want to be.
Beautiful. So when you look at your own journey, and I would say it's a continuous journey because it's like we never finish. We always are evolving and growing. But what has been the main impacts of living your authentic life? How do you experience it? What does it bring?
A few years ago, so I've been on LinkedIn probably since 2007, 2008. And when it started back then, if people have been on LinkedIn for a long time, was I'm proud to announce I won this award. Got this promotion. I spoke at this event. Then during the pandemic, things changed and people started to get a little bit more personal. But even before that, I one time posted a picture of a tattoo on my back. It was crazy. It was a lotus and a little Om symbol. And I said, people don't typically expect lawyers to do this. And I had the chakras on my arm. People don't expect this, but I did this. That was an explosive LinkedIn post. So many people reached out. And then I would find that when I would post something about, and so I just spoke at this conference about environmental, social, and governance factors, very little engagement. But when I would post something personal, people were completely engaged. Some of them would not respond in the comments, but they'd respond to me privately because they were afraid to be their authentic self. And then I one day posted about doing ayahuasca in Peru and the Amazon. And I talked about that experience and why I did it and why I was posting and about dealing with fears and sleeping with bats and taking mind-altering chemicals when my entire life is based on what I think. And I don't know what's going to happen to my mind afterwards. And a friend of mine, she's a coaching client also, she's a marketing person. She goes, don't put that up there. It's going to destroy your brand. I said, no, my brand is being authentic. And when I put that up there, people were saying, wow, I can't believe you posted that. They didn't post it on the comments. They'd reach out to me individually and they'd say, oh, I've done it 8 times. I've done it 6 times, but I could never put that out there like you did. And once I started putting more and more things out there, things that I didn't succeed in, things that I tried but didn't work out, things that scared me, I will tell you, Elena, there's not a day that I don't go to a conference and meet some person who I don't even know is following me that says, I love how authentic you are on LinkedIn. It's inspired me to do that. That is why I do it. I don't do it for the glory of, look at me, I'm so courageous. I do it because I have law students. I actually met a student a few weeks ago, an orientation, who said, part of the reason I came to University of Miami is because I've been following you on LinkedIn. And if there are professors like that at that school, that's where I want to be. That stuff makes me like want to cry, right? And the people that see that I am a lawyer, I'm a Black female lawyer. There's only 5% of lawyers in the United States are Black, even smaller number are female. That I can come out and say, hey, if you can't be authentic where you are, you're not in the right place. You might want to start there, but you're not going to be able to sustain yourself there. That's part of the reason that I do it. That's how I know I have an impact, because I have people, or if I post something on LinkedIn, I had a person tell me recently, I decided to go back to therapy because I saw your LinkedIn post. I realized I need help. That's why I do it. I don't get paid for that, but I get paid and my heart feels full. And that's like that $100 million for me.
Yeah. Beautiful. And thank you for sharing this, Marcia, because this is so powerful. This is so important because it's such a beautiful example of doing things not for the sake of doing the things, not for yourself, but also to be that role model, to impact other people, to encourage and validate and sponsor other people. And kudos for you, because this is so important. And you know it because you get this response and you get people like doing life-changing things in order because of what they read and what they see. So that's beautiful. And that also brings me to chapter 3 of the book, of part two, which is pursuing your passions unapologetically. It took me a while before I could really say that word without going over my tongue, but it is a very important thing. And I remember a story that you told in an email that you sent me about your travel expedition to climb a mountain. Yeah. Why your doctor advised against it? Because I let you tell, but this is for me, this is such a beautiful example of pursuing your passions unapologetically. So please tell us a little bit more about that adventure.
So it wasn't even a passion. It was something I did because I tell people do something scary at least once a month or at least once a year. This was my scary thing. I have never climbed a mountain, and my orthopedist doesn't want me to even climb a flight of stairs. I can't do lunges, stairs, or run because I have so little cartilage between my knees. And of course, and I live in Florida, a flat state. Of course, then I decided to go climb in the Himalayas for 9 days. And I went with my ex-husband, the one who divorced me, who changed my life. And he's an ex-firefighter, and with two other firefighters who, of course, are in spectacular physical shape. And then there's me. And I trained as much as I could, but I was supposed to train for 4 months. For about half of that time, I was sick, either with COVID or bronchitis or something else. So I really didn't get a chance to train too much. But when we went, I was able to do only a few days because I sprained my ankle, not because I wasn't fit, but because my trekking pole was defective and gave way. That required me, and by the way, this is in the Himalayas at Annapurna Base Camp, which is thousands of stairs, not steps, stairs up and down. So not supposed to do one flight of stairs. Sometimes like we're going up 2,000 stairs. That's a lot of stairs. And they're cobblestone, and they're on the side of a mountain, and there's yaks and sheep, and we have to watch out for the leashes. And it was rainy season. So this was any number of reasons why I shouldn't do it. But I did it anyway. And what I found when I sprained my ankle was that was the other best thing that could have ever happened to me. I had told the universe, teach me what I need to learn on this trip. And I thought I was going to be learning, no matter what my doctor said, I can hike for 9 days and go up to 13,000 feet, even though I live in a place that's below sea level. And when I sprained my ankle, I told our guides, I cannot walk any farther. I walked for a day on a sprained ankle, which is the equivalent to me of I've had kidney stones, I've given birth. The pain was worse than that. Right? Mm-hmm. There was no ice on the mountain, so I couldn't ice my mountain. Ice my leg. That, of course, said, wow, I'm resilient. But then I said, I can't go any farther. I'm going to live with these villagers until I can figure out how to get off this mountain. So I sat there and lived with villagers who had Wi-Fi and electricity, but then it went out. So for 2 days, I'm sitting there with villagers who don't speak English. I have my little translator, Google Translate. They can't read, so they couldn't read my translation. So I'd point to, can I have this soup? I would pay them, that kind of thing. There was no Western bathrooms, no ice, no electricity, no Wi-Fi. And I was able to be still for those 2 days. Everything I taught myself about mindfulness, because I'm also a mindfulness practitioner, came in handy. I used EFT tapping to help deal with the pain. I did my breath work. Everything I coach about, everything I teach about, it was all meant to show me this is what it means. And then the next day, 2 days in, they said, okay, you can take a horse to the next place. And I don't know how to do horses because I grew up afraid of horses, back to that fear. I grew up afraid of horses. And so I had to be on this horse, which literally on the side of a mountain with no railing. And the side of the mountain was about, in some parts, the size of a little bit bigger than a sidewalk. And I'm on this horse. It is going upstairs. The guide is holding it, and he's telling me, you have to calm down. You're making the horse nervous. I said, the horse is making me nervous. He said, yes. The difference is if the horse is nervous, you're both going to fall down the mountain and die. He could speak English, apparently. So I had to, again, calm myself down. Everything I'd been learning about fear and calm and resilience and breath work and bringing myself down. And we got up to the mountain, and then they said, the only way to get off this mountain is a helicopter. And I said, okay. And Nepal has a terrible record for helicopters and plane crashes. I said, okay. So I got myself prepared. We took the helicopter and I got down. Those days on the Himalayas with the villagers, where I was in silence, were the calmest days I've ever experienced. Mm-hmm. Because again, it reminded me of the time during the pandemic And what my inner self was saying is, you graduated from that lesson. Now here's the next lesson. And my inner voice was saying, this is the story about resilience that you're supposed to tell. It's not the story about the person who was told by the orthopedist not to climb stairs and made it to the top of the mountain. It's the story of the person who didn't make it to the top of the mountain, but learned so much more about what she can do that is going to help inspire other people. And so I called it like a divine detour, right? I was never supposed to make it to the top of that mountain. I was supposed to be stuck in that village and to surrender and to know that it was going to be okay. Right? And to get in that helicopter, which scared me to death, but I did all my tools. And I tell people, you have to build up that resilience toolkit because you're going to need it. Part of me, when I was getting that helicopter, said, you lived through your dad being in hospice and your mother going through cancer last year and another family member almost being hospitalized for mental illness, all in the space of 30 days, you can get in this helicopter. So when I tell people to do things that are scary and to face their fears, is because you're telling your mind, I can do it. Because you could be paralyzed by fear, or you could remember, what have I already gotten through? Everybody that's reading this chapter or listening to this interview has already gotten through the worst day of their life. You have already survived it. More bad days may come, but you will survive it as long as you remember what you've already gone through. And so that was a great lesson. And it's something that I plan to write about, why being stranded in the Himalayas really taught me about what resilience really is.
That's beautiful. And indeed, it is about reflecting on the things that didn't work out and that didn't work out the way that we planned it. It's beautiful how you basically refocus and redirect that complete experience because you set yourself a goal. Like we all set ourselves goals or achievements or deadlines or whatever. We do that all our lives, especially as leaders, as entrepreneurs. And then if it doesn't work, especially women, we tend to think it's a failure. Even worse, we tend to think that we are the failure. And so if you can do what you are doing, it is extremely powerful because it's about learning. It's about what they so beautifully say, it's using your failures as stepping stones, but even more beautiful, you don't see it as a failure. You see it as a journey, you see it
100%.
as an event, and that is so powerful. That is
I
so
don't
powerful.
see my marriage as a failure. I see that was a catalyst to get me where I'm supposed to be. If I don't
Beautiful.
get a job or if I don't get a project or I pitch for something, it wasn't meant for me. It was for something else. Because I think what's for you is for you, and what's not for you is going to pass you by. And you don't fail. You fail if you don't learn from it. Every single person is going to, quote, fail at something. You only lose if you don't sit there and say, what am I learning from this? Either this wasn't for me, I was doing this for somebody else, or now I can tweak. What do I need to reframe? What do I need to do differently? So whenever something doesn't work out, I never sit there. I don't never think about it as this is my fault. I think, all right, there's something better for me, or this was not for me, or there's a lesson I've got to learn from it. What am I supposed to learn here? There's that saying that life happens to you or life happens for you. I think everything that happens for me.
Yeah. That's actually what we talk about in the book. In part 4, we are pioneering our potential, and chapter 3 is about thriving outside your comfort zone. And basically, your stories are so much about thriving outside that comfort zone. And I see a lot of women when they are outside that comfort zone, or even only think that they are outside that comfort zone, they go in protect modus and they close. And basically, they go in their reptilian brain and they fight, flight, or paralyze. And what I see you doing is actually expand. And you are talking about breath work, you are talking about meditation, you are talking about opening up for the new experience and what you can learn from it. And I think that is absolutely powerful and beautiful and an example that a lot of people can learn from. And I absolutely agree that you will write a book about this because you're telling this history or this story now in 5 minutes. But it's a lot more than that. It's a lot more than 5 minutes, isn't it?
And you mentioned something that's important about how the brain works. In that 2.5 years when I was sitting in my house, I also became a certified brain trainer and certified in applied neuroscience. And once I understood how the brain works and how we think, it really helped me do some very important, and also neurolinguistic programming, right? Really helped me reframe my thoughts. It made it much easier for me than it would if I hadn't gone through that, right? Because, and also you learn a little bit about what you believe and what you don't believe in, whether it's the universe or God or spirit or source or nothing. But we all believe in something. And so when you start to think about, I had to make my own belief system. And when I understood, this is how the brain works, this is how the subconscious works, this is how important language is, this is how important what you say to yourself subconsciously is really important. When I went on the mountain hike, I still haven't completely overcome my fear of heights. And one of the things we had to do is we had to cross suspension bridges between the mountain ranges, which if you look down, it's a terrifying experience. So I did a self-hypnosis, and it's something that I encourage people to do as well. I recorded my own voice and I would listen to it over and over again as I was falling asleep. And as soon as I woke up, I would listen to it. And I would talk about that I'm not going to be afraid of the heights. I'm not going to have any altitude sickness, because altitude sickness is a very serious thing. When you go to Nepal on these climbs, you actually have to prove that you have insurance to get a helicopter to get you off the mountain, because they cannot let you go if you have altitude sickness, because it's that dangerous. And I had no altitude sickness. And when it came time to go across the suspension bridge, I walked across with no problem. And one day I had to limp across with a sprained ankle, right? But it wasn't terrifying for me. And I had been terrified of that because I watched every single video I could find in English about this trail. So I knew where every rock was. I knew every bridge. And when it came time to go across, I walked across with no problem. That's how powerful the mind is. So when we tell ourselves, I'm afraid of this, I can't do this, I'm too old, I'm too young, nobody will love me. Even if you don't say it out loud, you're saying that to yourself all the time. Why not say something that, even if you don't believe it, at some point your brain's going to start to believe it? And so when I would do the hypnosis and I recorded my own voice, fall asleep, I had it on loop for 8 hours. And I'd wake up, and as soon as I woke up, I played it again as I was getting dressed. And so for those 3 weeks, by the time it came time for me to go there, I had zero fear of that. Zero fear. I did the same thing when I had to go to the hot air balloon, and did the same thing with others. So when I feel something scary, I reprogram my brain using my voice, not anybody else's voice, my own voice, because my brain's going to respond to that a little bit better, and it works. And so that's another thing I encourage people as a kind of a hack. You're going to do something scary. Maybe you have to do a presentation. You have to do a pitch for a client. You're going on an interview. I journal using all 5 senses, what happened as though it actually happened. And then I fall asleep, because you can fall asleep watching the news, which is terrible, right? or you could fall asleep listening to somebody's podcast, which is okay. Or you could fall asleep retraining your brain to overcome the fear. And that's one of the things that I do on a regular basis when I have to face something that I know is going to be a little bit tough.
That's beautiful. I believe that this is actually a way to overcome a lot of obstacles that we face or that we perceive, because a lot of obstacles are not real. They're just something that we perceive. And it's keeping us from doing amazing things because we are afraid of failure. We are afraid of not succeeding. We are afraid of what other people would think. We are afraid that we will not be able to get other people with us on a big project. And so I believe this is a very interesting solution that, honestly, Marcia, I'm going to try that myself, because I never did that. I believe that this is something that is very worthwhile trying, especially if we want to do the big things in life. And we are afraid to do the big things in life. This is like how we have been programmed. And there are exceptions like you are, but there are a lot of us that would love to do more, would love to do better, would love to co-create a better world, because this is what women also are focused on. But we just stay in our cocoon, we just stay in our comfort zone, because we don't know how to overcome real or perceived obstacles. So this is a wonderful way to,
And there's some frequencies with music. There's some video frequencies that actually have a specific effect on the brain, and you can do some research on that. So I would record it with that music in mind. But another thing to get out of your comfort zone, though, is to get around people who've already done it or who are where you want to be, and that might mean that as you're growing, you're going to outgrow some people that are very close to you, or you might have to find a new tribe. I as I am looking at where I want my business to go and who I want to be around and who I aspire to, I used to spend a lot of time listening to podcasts or watching videos of people who were just one step ahead of me. And that was helpful for a while, but that meant I was going to go that much slower. So now I listen to people who are 10 steps ahead of me, because that's going to propel me to go much farther and faster, because I'm saying that person can do it, I can do it. It takes a while to get to that. And to be honest, with age, I think you care, well, at least with age, the older I get, the less I care what people think about me. Because again, at some point, I'm the only person that has to live with this decision. My decisions might affect other people. So I don't want you to think I'm just living in this kind of bubble where I don't care what I say and what I do. And because I financially support 3 other people, my parents and my son. So obviously I have to be cognizant of that. But I also know if I play small, I'm never going to be able to support them in the way that they need to be supported and to live the way that I want to live. So I don't want to watch things on affirmations or those kinds of things for people who are like, I just made $10,000. I want to listen to people who are making 8 figures, and I want to hear what they have to say. And so the other thing I do is when I'm driving to work, I'm either listening to a podcast or listening to a YouTube video or listening to a presentation on those people, even if they're not in my industry, who talk about mindset, who talk about resilience, who talk about work ethic, because the only way to get way up there is to make sure that you know where you're going. And everybody's got different values, right? Some people don't want to make a lot of money. Some people want to save the planet. All right, then find somebody who's done something crazy and extraordinary and see how they did it and where they fell down and what their advice is.
Absolutely. It's about getting inspired. Actually, Marcia, this is what I'm also doing with this book, because there was this writing and I thought, okay, I can write all these things. But first of all, I know that a lot of people, a lot of women have a problem translating that to a practical level, because you can stay conceptual, like this is this and you can do this. But then what do you do with it? And this is why I started interviewing all these amazing women, because you are all role models and you all have achieved amazing things. And you all have been successful in your own way. I also like the concept of defining success yourself instead of the definition that we get from society. And so this is basically like the translation into practice of what I'm writing about. And so thank you so much also for documenting this and with these amazing examples, because they are very much resonating to a lot of people. And this is what is so important. And the third part of the book is then the downloadables, where people can do the work themselves. There's guided meditations, there's journaling prompts, there's assessments, there's little exercises in order to really integrate the learnings and what they have seen, how other women have done it. And I think that is the power of the book. And that is the power of your story. And that is the power of the stories of so many amazing women, because I do believe that we are role models. And we have to be aware of that people are looking at us and that we are impacting people. It can be our children, it can be our family members, it can be our teams, it can be like your students or other people that want to climb the Himalaya. But this is what you're doing. This is really feeding the spirit and the sparkles of other people and their aspirations and what they want to achieve in life. And so thank you so much for doing that. Thank you so much for doing that here for the book. But thank you also for doing that in general, for being who you are and contributing to a world of growth and empowerment. And I really like that. Absolutely beautiful.
Thank you.